Magnus likes to play weird openings, but today I'm going to show you a game where the opening's name sounds really weird too. It's called the grob opening, and it's literally one of the worst openings according to Stockfish. The game starts and Magnus plays g4. Immediately, Stockfish looks confused, wondering if humans really created it considering such a terrible first move gives white a -1 advantage. But Magnus, unlike Stockfish, knows that a good opening is all about confusing your opponent. Bonus points if you're late for the game. Black, however, has studied this opening and responds with d5, with the bishop laying eyes on the target. However, Magnus is not yet convinced. Have you really studied this opening? What if I make my position even worse? Magnus goes pawn e4, and the advantage now drops to -1.2, and there are no recorded moves with this opening in the database. That's how you know Magnus is targeting you as the test subject. Magnus not only confuses the opponent, but he also protects his pawn with the queen. In the process, he gives up his pawn, and then moves the knight to c3. Black opens up his pawn structure with e5, because there is really no point defending this pawn here. If Black had moved the knight to f6, this pawn was just going to move forward, and the knight has to go running back. If you thought about using the queen, trust me, you need to watch my queen video to see why that is wrong. Anyways, back to the game. Magnus goes even harder on the gamble with the move pawn h4, dropping to -1.5 advantage. When Magnus is letting the opponent gain advantage, you know something is really wrong. The game calms down a bit before the storm. Black develops the knight and white the bishop. But then we have pawn h5, and I think this is the moment things start to go downhill. Magnus's opponent probably knows he has the advantage, but he messed up by not going all in after the opening. Here, he should have gone knight f6. Mayhem, doesn't Magnus just push this pawn and the knight has to move? Not really, because after that, Black has bishop g4. Magnus, of course, would have to defend, and after a few exchanges, the knight would be in the center, and the game is pretty much lost for white. It's like that meme with the girl and the robot. Instead of the girl, we have grandmasters, and the robot stands for creativity. However, let's go back to the h5 move. Magnus takes and Black goes f5, forming this cute triangle defense in the center. Though cute, it's actually a bad move. It leaves the pieces too defenseless, and a better move would have been to put the knight in h6. Here's a really cool tip for you that a grandmaster probably forgot since it was a blitz game. If the opponent has his pieces kind of developed, you should focus on developing your own pieces. Magnus cannot hurt you if you have your pieces developed. 10 likes and I will sell a low quality shirt with this text to profit off my most loyal viewers. Anyways, Magnus is like, you kinda missed your chance to develop, buddy, so he goes for a pawn break with d3. If I was playing Magnus, I would not take this pawn because if Magnus is offering an exchange, you know it's bad for you. And Stockfish agrees. It's like making a deal with the Eisen of chess. Black takes, and the advantage drops to -0.3. What happens next makes you understand how the underdevelopment of pieces really hurts Black. Magnus goes bishop g5, and Black defends its queen with bishop e7. I think he was hoping for an exchange, but Magnus is not going to play his game. A better move would have been knight f6. It's really natural and allows you to focus on this part of the board. Magnus takes the pawn on d3, which Stockfish considers a bad move, by the way, and it makes sense why. I mean, the knight can go to b4 and forms a good attack with the queen. However, Black messes up. He goes for a bishop trade, and Magnus here has the advantage. Here's another cool tip for you. Pawns should not be on top of each other. Not because I don't support that, but because it damages your pawn structure. Magnus, being Magnus, is of course going to aim for that. By taking this knight, he gives the king a check, and of course Black has to take. Then he takes back the bishop, and the Black queen takes back the pawn. Sure, Black is a pawn up. However, that doesn't matter. Look at this pawn structure. It's worse than my financial situation. The king is feeling the pain since he has nowhere to castle. We are in a weird position here. It's the mid-game, but with the king being so in the open and the pieces being so unprotected. The white queen has more power and can afford to take risks. First, Magnus pushes the enemy queen out with the knight on f3. Black puts the queen in front of the king to protect the e5 pawn. Now the white queen moves to a4, putting pressure on this pawn which black protects with the bishop. But that's not really important. That move opens up the path for a queenside castle, and this rook becomes a menace. Black pushes the pawn and attacks the queen, so Magnus just slides it over. Here, black makes a huge mistake. He puts the bishop on c6, pinning the knight to the rook. But why is this move so terrible? A normal player would see this and instantly go rook h3 to protect the knight. But as I said, the king is in the open. You don't want to lessen the pressure just because you might lose a rook. So Magnus takes the pawn with knight to e5. Hold on, Mayhem. Isn't this a free knight? Nah, if queen takes, you have these rooks here that will skewer both the queen and the king. Black, of course, takes the rook, but now this knight will wreak havoc. First, it goes to g6, forking the queen and the rook. Black checks with the queen, but Magnus doesn't care that much because he has pawn f4. Then the queen takes this pity pawn here that was not doing anything, but just chilling in the distance. It's like that 50 Cent meme. Anyways, now we have this position, and here is another cool tip for you. If the enemy king is so defenseless, putting the queen 2 squares away is never the wrong move. The king is checked, and it has 2 moves available, knight to e7 and king to d8. If you thought knight to e7, good job. You know when to quit with your dignity. However, black doesn't, so they go king to d8. Magnus then pushes the pawn on d4. I'm telling you, this rook is doing so much work in the laziest way possible. If Magnus takes this pawn, then it's a discovered checkmate. Black stops that by moving to c4. Magnus then goes knight to e5, looking to mate in the d7 square. So black defends with knight to f6. Now here is something most of you probably thought. The next move is knight to c6, checkmating the king. But you forgot about this bishop in the corner camping a mile away just like you do in your regular games. So, what does Magnus do? Well, he just locks the bishop's coverage by going pawn d5. Here black resigns, but what would have happened if he didn't? First, black pushes pawn c6. White takes with the knight, and then the king is chased around. Apparently, Stockfish recommends sacrificing both knights and then mating the king using a pawn. This is next level insanity, and both players really didn't give it much thought. They just understood that the game was over. This is my final tip for you. Your king likes being around his pieces, so if you want to get mated and lose the game, get that king in the open. Bonus points if there are a lot of enemy pawns nearby. That's it for the grob opening. I hope I never see this in my games, but if I do, I will blame myself for teaching you how it works. If you want to learn more stuff, you can click this video here. Trust me, there will be some cool tips to help you with your games. Bye now!